All right. Will, let's, oh, we're good. Oh, we're going. That's great. I've talked twice now about auditions or auditioning. And I find that most of the questions I get from students via email or in general are about auditioning, and I get it. It is the doorway. It is the key to getting work. So I'll once again repeat my lack of expertise here. I'm a professional actor. I've been doing this a lot. I've had some success at this. Um, so I'm just sharing with you my experience and what I understand, also from a lot of experts in the field. So I do think there's worth in what I'm sharing with you. But I keep getting asked about auditions. So I thought I'd mainly video, I thought I'd do a specific lecture on video auditions because I've touched on them in the previous audition talks, but I haven't done one specifically. So what I want to offer you is this tip sheet, and I'm just going to go through it and answer questions and add to it based on those questions, because I get the, you know, we're here in this class. I'm trying to share craft and technique, and I take joy in it, and I think most of you do too, and I love the work. But I also get that sometimes we just hit the brass tacks of how do I get the fucking job. And so hopefully this helps. I'm just sharing my experience and my knowledge with auditioning on tape. So everybody's got the PDF in the chat now. Go ahead and open it. It's yours to keep, though I will edit it, potentially edit it based on what questions come at the end of this. And I'm just going to talk through it. This is sort of a tip sheet, a cheat sheet for hopefully everything you need to know, with some technical exceptions. I don't go into editing because that would be a different kind of discussion. But I touch on some aspects of it, etc. So I'm going to go through this tip sheet, which hopefully will help you in your own endeavors. More and more auditions are happening online. It's especially happening now because of COVID. And I think the industry is changing more and more in this direction. Now, this is a blessing for actors because it makes it gives you a lot more opportunities than you would have had otherwise. And look, if you're asked to fly somewhere for a second or third callback, that's great. You're spending money on something where you're really close to it. Whereas before, if you wanted to get to an audition in New York and you lived in Los Angeles, that was a costly proposition. And videos are really, really changing the landscape. So I'm offering you what insight I may have on it, and I'll answer questions, and I hope it helps everybody. Oh God, I'm seeing somebody say they don't see the document in the chat. Is anybody else having that trouble? I threw the PDF up in the chat. Other people got it? I'll try sharing it again.
If that fails, I can do a screen share. I have it up on my laptop right now.
Oh, thanks, bud. I just threw it up again. Any luck, Haley? No luck for Haley. Yeah, Will, why don't you do a screen share and I'll talk through it. That's not a bad way to go through it anyway. All right. So here we go. Now I'll put this in an email. Haley, you will get the document, but just in case anybody else is lacking it. Just some bullet points, starting at the top, finding auditions. The best way to get them is representation. That's agents, managers. I say it's the best way because they have the best relationships with casting directors. It is in the world of theater, it is not the end of the world if you don't have representation. In fact, many agents in LA don't want you doing theater. So there's only a few theater agents in Los Angeles. If you can, either through your representation or through friends, I would encourage you to get the breakdowns. This will empower you to ask your agents to go after certain auditions, or if you don't have an agent, to see if you know anybody that may be connected to that theater or that casting director that might get you in the room. For anybody that doesn't know, the breakdowns are what agents get every day with all of the new projects that are going forward and all the things they can submit their actors to casting for. Your casting websites are your next best bet. For theater, Playbill and Actors Equity are sort of the best. Actors Equity gives you access to all the open calls, but not the private calls per se. That's where the breakdowns and agents are really helpful. You can also find private calls on Actors Access and Backstage. Sometimes, those are services you have to pay for. Sometimes you can get auditions by going around the back end, and you can see that a theater or somebody is producing a show through Actors Access and Backstage. And then you can try to reach out to that theater privately and ask if you can get an audition. It's a good workaround. But in the end, especially if you're sending in stuff for film and TV, Actors Access is something worth paying for. Backstage, maybe. For theater actors that aren't yet equity but want to know about all the open calls, Playbill is the way to go. It's got all the information for it. It's ridiculous that equity took their audition postings off of the public sphere, but they did, and Playbill is your answer to that. Something I do a lot of, and you can do, and I encourage you to do, is going directly to theater websites. Most of them, sometimes you have to dig, but most of them have an auditions or casting section, and some of them have audition mailing lists. Sign up for them. Obviously, you can't hit every theater in the country, so you got to target it. Target theaters that you're interested in, and theaters in your area, theaters that you're going to have a more active access to. And then on that note, don't be afraid to cold call theaters. And what I mean by cold call in this sense is cold email generally, which is just finding, most of them have contact lists. You might not have a direct access to a casting person, but you got nothing to lose to reach out to a theater and say, hey, I saw that you're casting this. I'd love to submit a video. Would that be possible? And if so, who do I submit to? The worst case scenario is you're not going to hear anything. I've gotten a lot of auditions that way. Now, that doesn't mean I got work out of them, but I've gotten the opportunities. And then the last one is networking. And this is probably the most powerful one, but it's the hardest to sort of keep track of. This is knowing what your friends, especially directors or maybe casting directors, are working on and what roles might be available to you. And so you can stay on top of that through social media or just through staying in touch with them, however you stay in touch with them. And reaching out judiciously about roles you might be right for. I say judiciously in the sense that you don't want to be contacting, if you have a friend that's directing all over the place, you don't want to be calling them about every bloody job they're doing, unless they're a really close friend. If you're close enough, they don't even really count as networking anymore. That's a different kind of conversation. But if you know them, if you have a good relationship with them, if you've worked with them, you should feel good about reaching out to see if you can submit an audition or come into audition. Just don't overdo it, and make sure this relates to my networking lecture. Make sure that you're maintaining those relationships outside of the times that you're solely asking for a job or asking for something. Make sure that you maintain those relationships outside of it. So that is finding auditions. For preparation, and thank you again, Will. Oh, technology. And again, this is about video auditions, and I'm really specifically talking about video auditions for theater. A lot of this is true for film and TV, but not all of it. So be aware. I've tried to point out a few places where it sort of varies. Aim to get your audition in a day early. It leaves you room to fix things if problems come up. If you're choosing a piece, I encourage you to pick a piece that evokes the role you'd like to be cast in. So something in that vein. An ingenue for an ingenue, a villain for a villain, etc. And I often audition with the role itself. There are some breakdowns that will tell you not to do that, and you should follow those instructions. But if the breakdowns don't, it's up to you. I also know some people will tell you not to do that. The main reason I think behind it is the idea that if you audition with the part, there's more of an expectation for you to have a finalized performance for it because they're looking for the person to play that role. I don't really feel that pressure, but I guess I understand the argument. So follow your instincts. I'm not encouraging you one way or the other, but do audition with a piece, if you're choosing the piece, that plays toward the kind of part you want to play. And as ever, and I've repeated this many times, shorter is better. If it's a 1-minute audition, I'd aim for 45 seconds. If it's a 2-minute audition, I'd aim for a minute to a minute and a half. I can tell you from being behind the table, from watching video auditions myself, the auditors are making decisions within 20 to 30 seconds. They're making them so fast. That doesn't mean you need to do a piece that's that short. Tell your story, do your work, get excited about pieces. It's not that you have to limit yourself to that time frame, but 2 minutes is a long speech out of context, and the auditors will often zone out. So you're doing yourself a favor to keep it shorter. And you're doing them a favor. I mean, you're working on their attention spans, which is healthy. I would encourage you to make a schedule to prepare. That includes getting off book, working the material aloud, working it with a reader if you need one. Keep it simple but strict. I need a schedule. I need a schedule to help me prepare for auditions. Usually it doesn't mean me spending much time of my day every day, as long as I schedule it right. It could be 30 minutes or an hour a day for 2 weeks, which is not much each day, but if I stick to it, I'm more than ready by the time I put a video together. Now, you won't always have 2 weeks, so you have to schedule based on how much time you have, but I encourage you to do it. And if the setup, the instructions on the breakdown ask for anything that is abnormal, and I'm going to follow with normal, try to experiment with that ahead of time, so it doesn't catch you off guard and you're not dealing with it while you're trying to be artistic and shoot an audition. So for setup, follow instructions. I can't emphasize this enough. For all of this, you're just doing everything you can not to put any barriers between you and the job. And if they ask for a 1-minute video and you send in a video that's 1:15, they may not even watch your video. They have so many submissions sometimes. They'll take any excuse to disqualify you. So don't give them that excuse. So follow the instructions, read the breakdown carefully, and follow every instruction specifically. So general setup, shooting on an iPhone is fine. If you want to use a better camera, that's fine. I just encourage you not to make too much work for yourself. Keep it simple. You don't need to make an HD movie out of this. If possible, try to have a blank or neutral colored background. A blank wall works. A hanging iron sheet is good. Black works, but and it looks really professional. So black can be very good, but beware that some colors disappear in black and that your front light will wash you out much more easier on black. So it's something to be aware of, which goes to good front light is important. Of the technical things, it's one of the most important things. There are a lot of different lighting setups, and this is one of those things I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole on. A ring light works very well, and for theater auditions, I think it's all that you need. Film and TV can be pickier. They can be pickier about sound. They can be pickier about lighting. They can be pickier about setup. There's nothing wrong with that per se. I do think some of my film and TV friends bend themselves over too much trying to make it work. So a ring light, on a question from the chat, if you just Google it, you'll find it quick. It's essentially a lighting setup with a large circular light, often with a tripod in the middle where you can put your phone, and it's just giving you direct front light. So you set up the ring light in front of you, Google it. You'll see examples of ring lights. A 10 or 12-inch ring light is a good thing, a good basic setup for auditions. It gives you the right kind of front light, and somebody's throwing up a link. Very good. So you want good front light. You want your eyes to pop. You want your skin to be crisp under the light. You want to avoid getting washed out, which is white light taking out your color, and you want to avoid being faded, which is sort of, you'll know it when you see it. There's not the right kind of light in the room, so everything looks a little colorless, just a little distant. It's not crisp. For makeup and dress, I encourage you to keep it simple and professional. Aim to look good, but not glamorous. Don't overdo it. This isn't, you're not going to the prom. And if you want to dress toward the character, I encourage you. I do think, especially on videos, trying to dress in costume or overdress for the character is a mistake in that it can be distracting. I know actors that disagree with me on this. That is my opinion on it. And the point of all these things, getting a ring light, learning how to do the right things with your iPhone, knowing where the good setup is in your house, all these things, is that if you do this work, if you're going through Equity, if you're emailing theaters, if you're doing all these things to gather audition videos, you'll gather a lot. Not all the time, but there will be chunks of time where you'll have, I'll have chunks of time where I have 5 or 6 to do over a pair of weeks. And you can burn out on them, and they can drive you crazy. And especially some of them, you think it's such a fucking long shot. Why am I wasting my fucking time on this? You want to make it as simple as possible so that it's an easy process that can be as stress-free as possible, leaving hopefully the only stress for you on the work you have to do in front of the fucking setup. Um, and as I mentioned here, I have a cream colored wall that I leave blank in my room when I'm in my room. I'm traveling right now, but my setting that up, getting dressed, doing my hair or whatever, takes me about 10 minutes. So it's really fast. For shooting, unless instructed otherwise, shoot a slate. Introduce yourself and your pieces. Sometimes breakdowns will ask for more than that. If they don't worry about it. But the point of this, and I've heard a number of casting directors talk about liking it, and I know it sounds crazy, and it is a little crazy, but you're trying to appear relaxed and happy to be there. You're trying to introduce yourself in this very brief moment to say, hey, my name's Charles Pasternak. I'm really thrilled for the opportunity to audition for Bartender 2. Here it is. You know, and you're just trying to briefly introduce yourself. It seems silly, but a lot of casting directors like it, and it can be helpful. If you have a reader, have them stand in line with the camera. You don't want to be looking in the camera, but you want to be looking close. So you want to set a point just off camera and have them stand there. If they're next to the camera, make sure they're speaking at a lower volume. The auditors do need to hear them, but they don't. You're the star here. They want to hear your voice. So make sure your reader isn't louder than you. Make sure that you're the loud voice in the room. They got to hear the lines you're reading with, but this is not an audition for the reader. So if there's space for the reader to get back a bit, sort of behind the camera, that's great. It'll help with volume. On that note, and people will disagree with me on this, there are a lot of people that talk about mics. I don't think you need a mic for a theater audition. Film and TV may be different. They can be a lot pickier. Some casting directors can. And musicals are very different because part of your editing process is often editing your sound, which sounds crazy because that's not entirely an audition, but you're cheating in a way. But that's part of what we're doing with auditioning on camera. So for musicals, it most certainly is probably different. You probably do need a mic. But I don't think you need one for theater auditions. If you choose to use one, I have no wisdom on sound editing. It is a mystery to me, but I know many actors that have learned it. I'm sure you can too. If you're doing a monologue to another person in the scene, I would encourage you to look just off camera. Place at a fixed point just off. If you're doing a soliloquy, I would encourage you to look into the camera. There are some people that disagree with me on this. And I have vacillated a little bit on it. But I think soliloquies are best to the camera. If it makes you uncomfortable, or if you disagree with me, I would encourage you to pick a fixed point just off camera. If the audition piece was assigned by casting, I would encourage you both to be off book and to always have your sides in hand. They're a nice crutch. They're a nice thing to do with your hands, which can be a pain in the ass sometimes. And if you go up on a line, they might save you. Usually you'll cut, but they might save you. You might be able to save a good take because you got them there. You're not expected not to have them, so have them. But you should be off book because you'll do your best work off book. If the audition calls for a piece of your choosing, there's no sides. You're doing a set piece. And again, like my note on setup, this is to ease the stress of it. This is just, you're trying to make this as easy as humanly possible, as natural as humanly possible, so that you can focus entirely on the work and so it doesn't stress you the fuck out and you can move on to the rest of your life. My advice is to give yourself no more than 3 takes. Watch those 3 takes, pick the best, move on. I only shoot more, and this rarely happens, but I only shoot more if I look at all 3 of those takes and go, fuck, I didn't get it. And here's what I encourage, because I've had 1 or 2 people say to me when I've given this advice, you know, I never think I got it. I'm always freaking out. So I'm always going to shoot 100 takes. That's about preparation. And that's about, if you look at those 3 takes, if you choose to shoot more, you really need to know what you got wrong. It's not good enough to be like, I don't like this. You haven't done the right work if that's what you're feeling. You need to be, if you're choosing to go back and shoot more takes, you need to be able to look at it and go, this is what I got wrong. This is what I'm coming back to fix. Now, of course, it's not always as easy as that. And 3 takes are not always enough. But I can tell you, in my world of sometimes shooting a fuck ton, it'll keep you sane. And really, the first take or 2 are usually your best. You know, maybe the first one's a warm-up take, but For me, the second I'm almost always picking between the second and third take. I don't need more than that. And most of you don't either. So I encourage you to save yourselves time and mental health. If there are multiple pieces that are being asked for, shoot them separately and edit them together. Don't try to do them all in a line. For editing, again, that's a more complicated technical thing. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole on it. If it's your first time doing it, it is a learning curve and it does suck and it is intimidating. I encourage you to Google, find some good tutorials on YouTube. What I can tell you is that I, who am not a tech savvy person, as you can tell with my leaning on Will and him screen sharing for me for this and all that, you know, I taught myself iMovie on the iPhone. From shooting on Audition to editing it to uploading it to YouTube, you know, I can do it in 5 to 10 minutes. I pick the piece, I edit them together. It's very simple. Again, if you're adding sound, this becomes more complicated, but there is a learning curve, but you can get there fast. On the presentation side, open from black or a title card, crossfade to your slate, crossfade that to your pieces, leaving a little room for the fade, and then fade out to black or back to your title card. Keep it simple. I provide a sample email for reaching out, especially, well, not especially, for any time you're reaching out to casting with a piece. Keep it simple. Talk about having the extra materials. Let them know that you can get them anything else they need. And if you need to follow up, or if it's a place where you just want to make sure they got it, you can add a note saying, you know, I'd appreciate just knowing that you received this. Don't do that for open calls. There's too many people. You can do that with casting if you need to, but otherwise just send it off. Good, and then it's just some randomness. Once you get the gears rolling on audition vids, you're gonna end up with a lot. All of these things are just to ease the stress of it. Look, and of course you want to do good work, and I don't doubt that you will, but this really connects to the 3 takes. Don't try to be perfect. You never will be. You'll drive yourself crazy. Just aim for good work of professional quality. That is very achievable. Knocking it out of the park is you may well do it, but it may be hard for you to recognize. Just do good work, make it look good, and send it off. And then finally, you may note in this that I haven't really talked about acting at all. Shooting these vids is a craft of its own, and it's happening more and more in the industry. Of course you have to be good. Of course you have to look at your sides, you have to analyze them, you have to make strong choices on them. All the work we're doing in class, you need to apply to the sides or the monologue or the pieces. You have to be good. That is the minimum requirement. So what this tip sheet is for to help you with, hopefully, is to take this one technical aspect of shooting a bunch of videos for theater auditions and making that easier on you. So no, this is not a lecture about acting. This is a lecture to ease the process of getting your acting in a professional manner onto the screen so that you can share it professionally with casting. I think that's it. You know, I don't even know that, did I mention, I don't think I mentioned dimensions. I'll add that. You should be shooting from your waist to just above your head. That's a note. So waist to just above your head. And I will add that to the tip sheet, which I'll send out to the class. Good. Any other questions? And I would love questions if you've got them, because I can add them to the tip sheet and hopefully resolve things for anybody else, for things that may come up. Please just throw a hand up in the participants. I'm asking Alexandra to unmute.
Sorry, here I go asking another question.
I love it, please.
So so completely, like, not completely separate, but similar. You had once said that the MIT Shakespeare wasn't necessarily the best online resource, but it was very well put out, so that's why you share it. And I noticed when I was reading Henry V that, like, a lot of the words, like, instead of born, which is what they were saying on the tape as I was listening, it was said porn, which would be really bad to do an audition. Yeah. And I wondered if, aside from taking out my giant tome of Shakespeare, if there were other online resources that you could point to that are a little more accurate without being, like, you know.
Yeah, I think my favorite is playshakespeare.com. I'll throw that up in the chat. The problem with playshakespeare.com is that it's not a very well managed website. Or maybe their bandwidth is just shitty. I don't know, but it moves slow. There's a bunch of ads. Sort of a pain in the ass. With that said, they've done some really nice editing on the plays, and you can find them all there, including Two Noble Kinsmen, including even derivative stuff like Double Falsehood, Edward III. They've got all the pieces, and the editing is better. Because in class, if people are quickly jumping from piece to piece, it's a slow moving site. The MIT Shakespeare is just a better interface, and it moves fast.
That makes sense. It does move fast and you can scroll down. But as I'm reading it, I'm like, this would be really bad to say porn instead of born. And if you were
Yes.
like, and there's a lot of that in the Henry V. It was very strange where they substituted the B's for P's, like all over the place.
Well, with the Henry V, the reason you're reading those P's is you're really reading them from Fluellen. So Shakespeare's writing comically in a Welsh accent. And so that's why you're reading those P's in that case. So those are Shakespeare sort of he's mocking it, but you'll mostly see actors do it justice, sort of playing at a Welsh accent. With that said, I think most of the MIT Shakespeare is sort of copy pasted from the folio. So you'll see a lot of those. Now, Ariane is sharing with the...
I see that to the Folger website.
Okay,
so.
great.
Yeah, I had one other question, which is,
yeah,
I know there are a lot of great Shakespeare companies like Alabama and Oregon, and certainly the Old Globe and in New York. But in terms of Los Angeles, like, where are the places that, if you just wanted to stay around here, because you have a job and you can't just leave?
Yeah. For Shakespeare?
And are there any that are closer to like the southern end of LA County as opposed to the northern end? Because I know there's the one in the Will Gear Theatricum.
Yeah, the Will Gear Theatricum.
But that's like 2 hours from my house. So it that becomes very challenging too,
Well, I've never seen OC Shakes, but OC Shakes I've had friends work at. So I would look into that. They do have some equity contracts, so they're at least semi-professional, but I can't speak to their work. I've never actually seen it. Yeah, I mean, as far as going south in the LA area, that's the only one that jumps to mind.
That's not LA. Like, that's even further than Will Gear from me. Like, I'm like right in the middle of those two.
Then I don't, there's the Shakespeare Center of Los Angeles, but they don't really produce anymore. They will cast one or two sort of TYA, sort of theater for young audience shows a year. They're the ones that did the Tom Hanks Henry IV 2 years ago. They used to do a summer Shakespeare every year, but they just, I don't know if it was funding or choices or whatever. They decided to go much more heavily into the education direction and really don't produce very much. From where you are, I think it's just going to be a little bit of a drive. Nothing leaps to mind. I mean, if Will Gear is 2 hours for you.
Yeah, well, from Manhattan Beach to Malibu with traffic is easily like an hour to 2 hours.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, there's noise within in Pasadena, but I don't think that's any better for you.
No. Yes, I've heard of that. And I know that there's also the Kingsman, which is way up in Thousand Oaks. And then I think there used to be one that did stuff at the Aileen Barnstall place, but.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so.
Because you don't really stay in LA much, right? Don't you travel a lot?
I mostly travel. Yeah. It's been outside of the Porters. God. I don't remember my last job what was my last job? God, I don't know my last job in Southern California, outside of working with the Porters. I'll get back to you on that. Yeah, I don't know, but no, I don't. I really don't. As far as the equity companies, there's a Noise Within. There's the Will Gear Theatricum Botanicum. There's Kingsman Shakespeare. There's Independent Shakespeare in Griffith Park. There's OC Shakespeare. And I see people throwing up Antaeus. Antaeus does Shakespeare occasionally. They're really they focus more on different classics. And
that used to be an Alien, the Independent Shakespeare. That's the one I was talking about. They used to do it at the Alien Barnsdall House,
got
which,
it.
you know, it's the Frank Lloyd Wright House. But you're saying
Yes.
they Griffith Park.
They're
now.
in Griffith Park now. Great.
Yeah.
Of course. Any other questions? Any other questions? Especially regarding the tip sheet. That's all clear. Jennifer, excellent. Asking you to unmute.
Hey,
Hi.
so with TV film, they tend to say the slate should be, at least it's been my experience, at the end of the audition. It's interesting how you said it should be in the beginning. You find that true of all your theater auditions, that it's better that way?
I
Like
have
an
found,
introduction?
yeah, you know, it's funny that I have found it true, and I've found that in breakdowns when asking for slates, I'm usually I'm actually, in my experience, I've always been asked to slate at the beginning. So film and TV may have moved away from that recently. I haven't put something on tape for film or TV in about a year and a half or 2 years. Actually, that's not entirely true, but that's I don't even remember how I slated. But no, in my experience, it's slating at the beginning. So that may just be different. It may just be different either from industry or maybe specific.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think it depends on the casting director, because a lot of them lately are saying to do it at the end, interestingly enough.
That the idea of that doesn't bother me at all. I would much rather lead with the work and introduce myself after. So I actually like that idea, but no, in my experience, it's always been at the front. But to that, I'd always just say follow instructions. If they ask for a slate without instructions, I would probably encourage you to put it at the beginning. But then again, you might want to ask. I don't want to give anybody bad advice on that. My experience has been slating first.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, of course, thank you. All right, anybody else? Great. Well, then I won't have to do much editing at all. But waist to above head on the tip sheet. That's the frame you're aiming for. East Coasters,